Well, after all these years, it's like it's been 70 years since the crash at Roswell, and we're still awaiting disclosure. The most, we really haven't gotten much beyond the disclosure that what happened at Roswell was a crashed weather balloon. We haven't moved much past that. But I think most people expect disclosure as if the President of the United States comes on television and says, ladies and gentlemen, yes, we have evidence to verify that we are indeed being visited by extraterrestrials from outer space and that flying saucers are real. I think most people think that, okay, that's good. I can, what else? I don't think it's as simple as that. I like the X-Files. I agree that the truth is out there and that with a little effort on the part of any individual, you know, I'm not an Oxford scholar. I'm not an educator. I'm just a private citizen who on his own has just kind of dug into the secrets of UFOs. And to try to find out why or what the motivations would be to keep this a secret. And I would agree with the X-Files that yes, the truth is out there. But if you expect that the government's going to hand it to you on a silver platter, it will never happen. But that with a little effort, with a little sincere effort, that you can dig up enough research that you can get at least a handle on what the UFO phenomena is really all about. But I think disclosure is going to actually be a grassroots experience. It's like it has to come from the ground up rather than the top down, because there's too many vested interests. Petroleum industries, aerospace industries, banking industries that have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, which is to keep the public ignorant of flying saucers, to keep the public ignorant of the true implications of an extraterrestrial reality. Don't expect the President of the United States to tell you the truth, because the President of the United States himself doesn't know the truth. Because the President, whatever the President would say, is information that's being supplied to him by his intelligence agency. So the caretakers of the real UFO secrets are within the intelligence agency. And it's like they leak this information out as they see fit. And the information that they leak out would be to serve their own interests. So it makes real, genuine disclosure, especially from executive level, really difficult to be believable. I think we came the closest probably with President John F. Kennedy back in 1963. If he had been successful in taking down the CIA, as he promised to do, I think that would have opened a floodgate so we could have had real disclosure. But I think that's also one of the reasons that Kennedy was assassinated, because the CIA had too much vested interest in keeping this a secret. And I think, all the years since then, they have deepened and strengthened that power base so that the truth never comes out. Well, I think back to the Jimmy Kimmel's interview with Barack Obama, where Barack Obama just flat out stated, he said, yeah, we can't tell you because the aliens won't allow us. And then he laughs, ha, ha, ha. But if you look at his face, it's like, I think he's telling the truth. And at the end of the day, it's really not up to the president to disclose a reality. It's up to the extraterrestrials themselves. The bottom line is like, if we're going to have real disclosure, it's like, it shouldn't come from any government agency. It shouldn't even come from the Vatican. It should come from E.T. himself. And until that happens, it's like, I think it will remain just a very confused muddle. Now, but with that in mind, way back in 1988, there was a television show called Television Documentary, a special television documentary that was 2 hours long, that was aired both in the United States and the Soviet Union. It was called UFO Cover-Up Live. And frankly, that was about as close to really serious disclosure as we have ever had. And the public complained that it wasn't entertaining enough. So this was an astounding video. This was an astounding production. It was hosted by Mike Farrell, who was one of the stars of the popular MASH TV show. And they interviewed eyewitnesses and experiencers and pilots and military officers from all over the world, and even Soviet personnel who had UFO experience. This is an unprecedented 2-hour TV production where they introduced the gray aliens to the public. That the aliens that had favored nation status with our intelligence community were the grays. So it was like an infomercial to sell the grays to the public. It was an astounding production. And over the course of that documentary, they had interviews with 2 personnel who claimed to be intelligence people, who were photographed in shadow and with their voices altered, and who were called Condor and Falcon. They were from the aviary. And to me, the most astounding thing that was either Falcon or Condor stated was that, yes, the extraterrestrials have complete control over Area 51. And nobody clamored over that. The American public didn't rise up and say, how dare, what do you mean? Our most sensitive military installation is completely run, owned, and operated by extraterrestrials? What are you saying? But it's like, the American public was given an astounding chunk of disclosure, and they just seemed totally indifferent to it. So I was like, well, why bother with disclosure in the first place? Is it, we could give you disclosure and you wouldn't believe it. What does it take for the public to accept some kind of disclosure?
In 1957, Walt Disney produced a TV program called Mars and Beyond, featuring Wernher von Braun's scientific speculation about a manned space mission to Mars. That documentary cryptically stated, "Rocket ships of all sizes and shapes have been designed, but most of them rely on an enormous consumption of chemical fuel to escape the pull of Earth's gravity. A spaceship using an electromagnetic drive to neutralize gravity is the obvious answer. But such a device is still a dream for the future." And of course, the electromagnetic spaceship Disney artists provided was a flying saucer. For real disclosure, maybe we need to get back to basics with public advanced technology expositions, the way Walt Disney's Tomorrowland was originally intended way back in 1955. Perhaps a far more meaningful approach to genuine disclosure would be to provide a public forum for a practical proof-of-concept demonstration of flying saucer technology, to at least showcase once and for all that circular, anti-gravity flying machine propulsion is not a fantasy.
So over the years, it seems to me we've had disclosure. Listening to Grant Cameron, and he said that within Canada, if the Canadian government wants to keep something a secret, it is a secret. You don't discuss it, end of story. It's not leaked out, in little fragments. A secret is a secret. A case in point would be our Manhattan Project back in 1945. We were developed from 1942 to 1945. We were developing the first atomic bomb. Well, the American public had no knowledge of that. This was deep secret. And in 1945, when they detonated the Trinity bomb in New Mexico, even then, the government, when people in Arizona, New Mexico, Texas claimed to see this incredible fireball in the sky and this incredible roll of thunder, the government said, no, it was a meteor. Or no, it was mass hallucination. I love it. It's like, has anybody ever documented a real mass hallucination? But the government said, no, there's nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing out of the ordinary ever happens. Oh, this is July 1945. A month later, we were dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan. And then suddenly, oh yes, we really did have an atomic bomb. And that's what people saw in New Mexico. So it's like, can the government keep a secret? If they want to keep a secret, they can keep a secret, I guarantee you. But with regard to the UFOs, the Roswell incident from 1947 until 1979 was a secret. Nobody talked about it. But then in 1979, Jesse Marcel Sr. came forward and said, oh yeah, I handled extraterrestrial, wreckage out in the New Mexico desert near Roswell. And so from that point on, suddenly we have this explosion of fascination with the UFOs and the Roswell crash and this and that. And it's kind of taken over by the mass media. It's kind of taken over by Hollywood. So on one hand, you have the government saying there's no such thing as flying saucers. But on the other hand, you have Hollywood, you have the mass media, which is also government, national security state entity, which is constantly feeding disclosure through fictional scenarios to acclimate the public to, yeah, there really is flying saucers. Yeah, there really are extraterrestrials. You have Steven Spielberg, the most successful producer of flying saucer propaganda on the planet, has been at the forefront of this. We're educating. We're creating a managed perception of flying saucers and extraterrestrials. So what may have been frightening in 1947, now it's like, well, you can watch it on Ancient Aliens. You can watch it on the History Channel. You can go to the movies. You can see you can see Marvel Comics movies. You can watch Captain America. It's like dealing with extraterrestrials or hyperdimensionals. It's like, yeah, it's fun. It's science fiction. It's not real. But the point is, you're being educated subliminally to realities that if you were told from a government agency that hostile hyperdimensional entities can access our world and influence our reality and kill people, that wouldn't work coming from the president. But if it comes from a Marvel Comics TV or movie, oh, well, that's fun. It's just science fiction, blah, blah, blah. But it's not. It's managed perceptions. So this is one of the oldest axioms, as long as there's been governments, that stagecraft is statescraft. That what's the big issue right now is fake news. How do you know what news anymore is the truth? Did we really land on the moon? Who shot John Kennedy? Was it really Lee Harvey Oswald? We have, with the advent of television, and this is over the whole course of my life, we have come to believe that what we see on television is our reality. when in fact, but the powers that be understand that. And I said, well, as long as we can create a visual representation of this, the people will accept it more readily. So television, films, any kind of visual media, the internet, whatever, it's like is a perfect venue for stagecraft, which is statescraft. Earlier I mentioned Grant Cameron. Grant is a Canadian researcher who's just come out with a brilliant book that I think really, where he's really got a handle on what the UFO problem, what the UFO disclosure problem really is. And it's called, his book is called Managing Magic. And the thrust of it is that we live in a world where we accept all this 3D reality as all there is. It's 3D reality. So if ETs come into your bedroom and abduct you at night, they must be flying here from another planet. They must be physical entities that are able to fly here from another planet and interact with us in our physical reality. The problem is that maybe our fundamental perception of physical reality is not correct. That there are no ETs, there are no extraterrestrials. These are hyperdimensional entities that live just outside our perception of reality. They aren't little guys that live on a planet millions of miles across the galaxy. They're right here, right now. But we cannot perceive them within the limitation of our physical our physical bodies. We cannot perceive them. We can't perceive them, but they can perceive us. And that's the disadvantage that we have here. So in Grant Cameron's book, he's arguing that one of the major components of ufology is that we're not dealing with just this 3D reality. We're dealing with hyperdimensional realities. And that's where ET comes from. That's what Tesla Technologies can access. That you can create free energy devices that can slip in and out of this reality. He says that does not work with our very limited 3D perception of reality. It doesn't work with our 3D perception of economics, of petroleum industries, of banking industries. So we expect everything to be solid 3D, and this reality is all it is. And he's saying this is one of the reasons why they can't give disclosure, because the public simply has no perception. We have not been properly educated into the fundamentals of this reality, so-called reality, in the first place. We don't know who we are. We don't know where we came from. And we've been conditioned to believe that this 3D reality is all it is. And he's saying that the whole UFO phenomena exists outside of that limited 3D perception. And it's like, since the public can't fundamentally deal with that, it's like, we don't talk about it. But even Billy Meyer, you take Billy Meyer, his contact case with the Pleiadians. It's like the Pleiadians said, you could get in a spaceship and fly to our home planet in the Pleiades and you would not find anybody there, because we don't exist in the same time-space continuum that you do. So the Pleiadians themselves are hyperdimensional entities from our physical perspective. During the Eisenhower contact at the Muroc Air Base in 1954, one of the gentlemen who was there to witness this UFO contact with extraterrestrials was a gentleman selected from Los Angeles who happened to be an expert in metaphysics. And he described the extraterrestrials not as extraterrestrials. He called them Etherians. He had an understanding of hyperdimensional physics. So he called the extraterrestrials not ETs, he called them Etherians, which actually is a more accurate description. It's like they are hyperdimensional entities that are able to access our reality. And he said that over the course of Eisenhower's interaction with these entities, they vanished right in front of him, causing Eisenhower considerable embarrassment. Well, once again, it's like, we're not dealing, this is something that is outside our perception of normal 3D reality. And this is the hardest thing that that we have to deal with. The other thing is Cameron talks about is telepathy. That, as kids we were told, there's no such thing as ESP. There's no such thing as that. That's nonsense. Or that you could have psychic contact with an extraterrestrial. No, that's you must be crazy. If you're hearing voices from extraterrestrials, you must be crazy. Well, the point, in fact, is that our own government employs remote viewing. And remote viewing is a technique for expanding your own consciousness outside of 3D, where you can access any time, any space, any location. And we all have the capacity to do that. And the government has programs specifically designed to use that skill. And back in the mid-90s, I was a bona fide skeptic of remote viewing. I thought, this is nonsense, and this is hogwash. So I took a weekend course in a remote viewing training session, which was based on the training session that the actual CIA uses. And over the course of that weekend, I was absolutely blown away about my own ability to access information outside of time and space. So we are ourselves hyperdimensional entities. But this is something that it's going to take a while, and it'll take a lot of re-education with the public for them to handle that. In relation to this managing magic, we see that the primary secrets to the UFO, the whole UFO issue, have been sequestered within the intelligence community. And there are certain individuals within that community who become the caretakers. They have the sole responsibility of maintaining this secret information. And Grant Cameron refers to them as the magicians, which is very interesting because if you think back, the original secret group that Truman created back in 1947 to study this phenomena were referred to as Majestic 12, MJ12, or Magic 12, which in itself suggests occult connotations. But if you go online, you can find there's an interesting transcript that's alleged to be President Reagan's ET briefing from CIA Director William Casey. And I don't know how authentic it is, but if you read it, it sounds very, very plausible in that President Reagan was briefed by one of the magicians, a gentleman referred to in the briefing as the caretaker. And this caretaker had been in charge of the UFO information for, I think 20 years. So these gentlemen are, they outlast individual presidential administrations. And it's their job to brief the president, brief whoever becomes president, to brief them on the UFO extraterrestrial issue. So even if you become president of the United States and you get this briefing, you're getting the CIA's version of what the secrets are, okay? And the current caretaker according to Grant Cameron, is a gentleman by the name of Ron Pandolfi. And Ron Pandolfi has been allegedly the caretaker of this information over the last 4 or 5 presidential administrations. In fact, allegedly, he spent a good part of December briefing President Trump on the ET issue. So President Trump is now brought up to speed on the intelligence community's perception of UFO reality. So the magicians, the caretakers of this information, select certain individuals to go public with their version of the UFO secret. One of whom would be Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer would be considered a messiah. The people who are public spokesmen, who are chosen to be public spokesmen of the UFO secrecy, he labels them messiahs. These are the people. He's somebody like Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar claims to have an experience at Area 51, examining a captured UFO. And then he has his experience. He has shown selected information from the CIA files about extraterrestrials, about the history of this phenomenon, and then he's allowed to go public. But my question is, like, once again, is this a controlled narrative? If President Trump was to go public today and tell the story of UFO reality, it would not be President Trump's firsthand knowledge of it. It would be President Trump becoming a messiah, telling the CIA's version of what we want the public to know about this phenomenon. So it's like, once again, it's like, it's another buffer between UFO reality and the intelligence community. So where do you get the truth in this? Are you getting the truth? Are you getting fragments of the truth? Are you getting a controlled narrative that maintains the power? The obsession, the national security state's obsession is with power and control. And you go back to the whole history of the UFO phenomenon, even from the beginning. If there really are machines like flying saucers, we would want to have absolute control over that technology to maintain our power and control. So it's like there's always this obsession. We want more power, we want more control. And that's always, at the end of the day, that's always the motivation behind secrecy and non-disclosure. It's like, if we give disclosure, we lose control. Well, my UFO research, going from 1980 until 1997, the end of our TV show, I thought we had covered a lot of stuff. I thought we had covered a lot of material. And I thought I had a pretty good handle on the whole UFO phenomenon. But about 3 years ago, online I found a presentation by Richard Hoagland, where he talked about the formation of the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab in California, in Pasadena, and its connection with NASA in developing space rockets. The gentleman who was instrumental in founding the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena was a man named Jack Parsons. And what Hoagland shared about Jack Parsons opened a whole different perspective of UFOs, space technology, and its connection with the occult. Jack Parsons, aside from being a brilliant rocket scientist, was also a student of Aleister Crowley, the famous British Satanist. And Jack Parsons became involved in, he became so involved with his study of Aleister Crowley and the Ordo Templi Orientis Lodge, actually became like, Crowley became his mentor. Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley were both fascinated with the idea of opening dimensional portals so that hyperdimensional super entities could access our reality. And they were doing this using black magic ceremonies. In 1945, Jack Parsons, along with L. Ron Hubbard, were doing secret occult workings out in the Nevada desert, in the area which is now Area 51, to open a dimensional portal to hyperdimensional demonic entities. And Jack Parsons later on bragged. Jack Parsons, after 1940, after 1945, Aleister Crowley died in 1947, and it was shortly after that that all the UFO phenomena, burst upon the public. And then after that, after all this hoopla about extraterrestrials and UFOs, Jack Parsons openly bragged that flying saucers were indications that we were turning the world over to Aleister Crowley black magic, and that flying saucers were part of that. And eventually flying saucers, he was very proud of that somehow they were using black magic to create this phenomena themselves. Jack Parsons died in June, I think, of 1952. He was working at his lab in his home, and there was a terrible explosion. He was instantly killed by it. But then the month after that, we had flying saucers buzzing the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. So the question is, and this really bears more serious research, is that did in fact Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons, did they in fact open portals to hyperdimensional entities that are now having free reign in our reality, demonic entities? And this is, I have no conclusive research on this, but it's very disturbing, and I think it's a line of research that deserves closer study. Because ironically, where Jack Parsons worked in near Pasadena, developing his first rockets, was in the Arroyo Seco, close to a dam called Devil's Gate. And the black magic that he was using was ancient Babylonian black magic, and Babylon means gateway of the gods. So were they actually invoking hyperdimensional overlords to interfere with our reality? And that's disturbing enough. But today we have the inventor of the D-Wave quantum computer. His name is Geordie Rose. And he claims that his quantum computers, much like Jack Parsons, can intersect and interface with hyperdimensional realities. And that, in fact, they want to invoke entities he calls the Ancient Ones into our reality. And this sounds like very dark, very ancient Babylonian, Enochian magic to me. And I think it bears watching, and it bears serious research. So anyway, that's kind of a thumbnail overview of what I've researched in 38 years, soon to be 40 years. I have chronicled most of this research in a series of blogs that you can access on my website, which is jimnicholsufo.net. And I have like 27, I'll soon have 28 blogs on that website. And I think not to brag or not to sound self-aggrandizing. I think if you read all 27 blogs, if it will give you at least a background, a good workable background to understanding the UFO phenomena, to where if we do have disclosure, it might not be such a radical shock to you. And like I said, the X-File says that the truth is out there. And this is my attempt to share the information that I've gleaned over 40 years of research. And I feel like it's there for the public. Also, I put this information out there not to preach, but to hopefully stimulate your own research into these fields and come up with your own answers and your own conclusions. My blogs and my videos are generously laced with my UFO artwork. So I'm very humble and thankful to the response that the general public has had to my art. It's very gratifying. So thank you. My name is Jim Nichols. I appreciate your interest and your support of my artwork, and I hope to keep up the good work. Thank you so much.